Yes, we are in week 2 of CYB480, Essential Tenets of Cybersecurity. This video this week will be much shorter than the one last week. It won't be a 3-part venture, but like I said, I really wanted to kind of try to lay a good foundation with week 1 of many of the topics, the foundational topics that you need for this class. So week 2, really, you're looking at 2 things that you're going to focus on. Is chapter 5 and chapter 15. Chapter 5 is protecting security of assets. Chapter 15 is security assessment and testing. And during this week, you're also going to be working on your hands-on labs and the exercises, depending on which track you're taking. If it's the CISSP track, the SSCP, or Security Plus track. All right, let's get into this. So when we think about protecting security of assets, well, you know, you're going to always, probably in this class, see me work with this security in depth model. That's what I call it, and your risk to critical information. And when we think about assets, we're going to try to protect our secure assets. First of all, you have to ask the question, where are our secure assets? And that's what we're looking at here. You know, where are the golden eggs? Where is the critical information? Where is that CPI? So and these are some of the topics, if you're looking in our textbook, that that's going to be addressed this week. I'm going to really focus more on, for this lecture, on security controls. But once you understand first where is the critical information, then that helps us to know how to classify it and how to support it. Typically, classification is done by the information owner. They are the ones who are going to decide what is the classification of the information that we're protecting, as well as the assets. And that leads into, yes, determining ownership. Who is the information owner? Who owns the information? Excuse me. Normally, as cybersecurity, we are not the owner of the information. Sometimes we may be the custodian, and most of the times that is not us, because typically IT or someone else is going to be that custodian or someone who's appointed by the information owner. We are responsible for monitoring activity associated with that information. Another topic that's covered in our lesson this week is protecting privacy. I tell you guys, this is getting to be more and more important, because you've got GDPR, you got global data protection rights legislation that's been passed in Europe, and now we're going to see more and more of this within the United States and other countries on how to protect the privacy of information. Retention. How long do you keep information? When do you get rid of it? And also, how do you get rid of it? Certain information, especially if it's digital media, we're going to talk about different ways of destroying that media. But when we think retention, what is the retention time? And really, again, this goes back to the information owner. Sometimes information retention is based on legal parameters. It could be federal law. There are many things that can determine how long we need to retain information, as well as handling requirements. How do we handle? What's the proper handling requirements and markings and things of that nature? All of those things go into protecting our critical resources. But like I say, what I'm going to really focus on for the next couple of minutes is our security controls. What type of controls do we put in place to be sure that this critical information is protected from our bad actors? However, at the same time, we allow our good authorized users to be able to access that information through our network topology, through our information systems, servers, whatever they may be, as well as on those shared services like file servers where that information resides. So when we think about that, we're going to kind of drill down using the risk management framework, NIST special publication 837, as our backdrop. Now, when if you remember from last week, we talked about this a little more in depth. The six-step process where we categorize our information type, select controls, implement, assess controls, authorize, and then monitor. So we're talking about step 2, selecting the right security controls. Now, before we can talk about that, one of the things we always hear again, want to just do a quick refresh on our roles. because the individuals who are external to your organization as well as internal roles, because these individuals are a key part or key stakeholders in helping us define the information types, how that information is categorized, how it's classified, how it's retained, how it's destroyed, all those things throughout the life cycle of a piece of information. Knowing that is very important, because if we're going to select security controls to protect that information, those are all key attributes into understanding that. And that is really, especially the mission business owner and the information system owner. These two roles are very critical. The mission business owner, that's the individual who basically owns the information. Information system owner may be the same person, many times they're not. But this is the individual who owns the information system that processes the information that the mission business owner owns. So like I say again, in many organizations, same person. Other organizations, it can be a completely different person, completely different organization. So when we talk about controls, if you're here again, I kind of plagiarized some of my own slides from last week. We have threats, okay? Well, first let's start over here. We have an asset. We have some critical information stored on an information system. And there are known vulnerabilities. There's always vulnerabilities to information on information systems. We know we have threats, and these threats are always trying to do what? Exploit these vulnerabilities to get to the information that's on that information system. To mitigate these threats, trying to exploit these vulnerabilities, we put controls, security controls in place. These controls can be technical, like firewalls. They could be physical, like security guards, locks on the doors. They could be administrative, such as policy, training, duty positions, and all of those types of things. So there are multiple types of controls we can put in place to try to mitigate the likelihood of a threat or a threat agent taking advantage of a vulnerability and exploiting and gaining control of critical information. Now, we'll tell you, can we mitigate 100% of every control of every threat? No, and many times that would be way more expensive than sometimes the information and the information system is worth. So because of that, you're always going to have residual risk. And we talked last week, you can either accept that risk or you can do some type of cost-benefit analysis to see how much will it cost to mitigate that risk. So that is where our controls, this is what we're focusing on today, are these controls. And when we think about controls, and I'm just going to continue to use the risk management framework, the NIST series, to talk about this. NIST 853. This is the National Institute of Standards and Technology special publication that lists all of the security and privacy controls for federal information systems and organizations. Excuse me. Like I said, in security controls, what are they? Really, safeguards. They're countermeasures that we put in place in order for us to maintain the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the systems and the information that they process. And when we have these controls, really, we many times we'll put these in a document we call a security control traceability matrix, an SCTM. And all that is pretty much, like I say, it's just a list of controls. It's a way for us to monitor that, to manage those controls. So we know which controls we're going to use and which controls we do not need to use for our information system. So when we think about selecting the right controls, it's kind of a four-step process. The first thing you have to select is the initial baseline set. What is the initial control set we're going to start with? And then after you do that, now we're going to see if there are any types of additional requirements, what we call overlays. For instance, if you're working with classified information, there's this thing we call a classified overlay. And what that overlay does is it mandates additional controls that have to be put in place because the information we're protecting is classified as secret, top secret, confidential, or whatever it may be. Then we go to step 3, and then where we tailor our control set. Once we've got this laundry list of controls that we're going to implement, now we look and say, there are certain controls that in our environment we will not need to implement this control, so we can tailor that one out. Or at the same time, that may be a control that wasn't initially selected, but we say, you know what? In our environment, and based on our mission area, our business area, we may need to use that control, so we can tailor that control in. And then from there, we build that and we supplement the tailored set of security controls with other things that we may need to do. Because at the end of the day, we want to mitigate as many threats trying to get to vulnerabilities. So let's dig a little deeper in this thing we call controls. If you look at the NIST 853, there's over 900 controls in this document. 900. Now, does that mean we're going to use all 900? No, no, not at all. And how it breaks out these controls is in what they call control families. And this is the 18 security control families. There are an additional, and I don't remember the number, but there are additional control families that deal with privacy. Okay, so there's more than 18 families, but for the biggest part of security, we focus on these 18. Now, these 18, they all operate in some functional way to mitigate risk. And for instance, you have the AC family, or the access control. That's controlling access to information. AT, training, awareness and training. AU, auditing. And as you see, you continue to go down the line, and all of these families have multiple controls in them. For instance, the AC family, there are 23 main controls, but then within those 23, it breaks out to an additional 89 sub-controls. So now you see that this palette, this list of controls can get out of control if you're not very careful, because there are just so many of them. So that's why we have to have a way of tailoring these controls down. So now when we look at these controls, let's go down a little bit deeper. Okay, now let's take the AC family, for instance. We're just going to take one control. So if you're working for the federal government and you're using the NIST 853 standard, which mandates how these controls, this is how it breaks out each of the controls individually. It has the controls title. For instance, the title of AC2. I'm just picking out one of the controls. And they are sequentially numbered. AC1, AC2, AC3, and this family goes all the way to AC23. Okay? So AC2, account management. That's the control ID and the title. And then beneath that, it actually tells you what the control is. So in this case, this is what we call the NIST, the verbiage itself. It says, the organization, basically your organization, will identify and select the following types of information system accounts to support organizational mission and business functions. And now you see these little brackets, those are your assignments. Inside of that, this is where you actually define within your organization what type of accounts that you use. And accounts could be a general user account, it could be a privileged user account, it could be a group account, a service account, temporary account. So within your organization, you identify the control types. The account types that you're going to use. Part B says, now that you've identified the account types, now you assign account managers to manage the information system accounts. And then type C, part C of this same control, is that now you establish what are the conditions for group and role membership. So you see they follow a very logical order. I got to identify my account types. I got general user accounts and I got privileged user accounts. Okay, let's say that's the only two types of accounts. Now I need to find someone to manage those accounts. Part B. Now after I found someone to manage the accounts, now I need to come up with the the prerequisites or the conditions for someone to be a member of that account. So let's say that I have privileged user accounts. What are the role memberships? Well, you may be a system administrator. You may be a local administrator. You may be a database administrator. All of those roles would need to have some type of privileged user account. And that is what C is saying. Is that, okay, now you need to establish what the group and role memberships are. Now, then NIST takes it even a step farther, because they understand that sometimes this right here is broad or not as specific as it needs to be. So they provide NIST supplemental guidance. And this supplemental guidance, here again, gives you some more definition into what these are. In this particular case, it says what? Information system account types include, for example, individual account, shared account, group account, system accounts, guest accounts, So it gives you a list of account types to choose from to help you do the assignment in part A. So that is what we're talking about. This is what a security control actually looks like within the NIST 853. So how do you say, well, if you got 900 of these controls, how do you know what to select? That's a good question. I am glad you asked that. That we have to establish the initial baseline. That initial baseline is based on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So when we look at how our system is categorized, that is going to help us to determine what level of confidentiality do we need, what level of availability do we need, and what level of integrity do we need. And then from that, we're able to actually select if it's a low, moderate, or high for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, based on that, wherever these X's fall out, that tells you which of these controls you're going to select based on your information system. So that's why the role that we talked about earlier, the stakeholders, is so important, because your mission business owner, the information owner, and the information system owner, they are the ones who help develop the categorization. Once they tell you the categorization that this system is a moderate, low, low. Okay, if it's moderate, low, low, then we will now know how to start selecting the right controls, the initial baseline, to start to whittle that 900 number down to something that's more manageable, 300 to 400 controls. So that is how we establish our initial baseline. Okay, let's switch gears and let's now talk about, okay, we've got controls in place. Now we need to be able to assess and test those controls. And really, we've kind of gone from step 2, is selecting controls, and we've gone to step 3, which is implementing controls. And now we're going to really kind of go to step 4. So we got the controls in place, we implemented them in step 3, and now step 4 of the risk management framework, how do we assess them? And this is chapter 15. In chapter 15, these are the topics that are covered in chapter 15. How to design and validate an assessment and test your strategy. What is your approach? What is your approach to assessing controls? How to conduct your security control testing. How do you collect the security process data? How do you analyze and report the test results? Okay, so you did the test. So what's the results? And how do you conduct audits? Now, here again, for this purpose here, I'm just going to kind of focus in on security control testing and vulnerability testing a little bit. Same thing. So we've applied our controls to our information system, and now we want to say, well, how do I know that the firewall that I set up on this switch is working? Or how do I know that the discretionary access controls that I've have assigned to the information objects in this folder, how do I know it's working? Or the accounts that I've set up. That is what assessing a control is about. We've implemented it, we've got the policy, we've got the processes, we've got the procedures, we've got training in place, but now are those all the things needed to validate and verify that control is actually working? So the first part of that, what we're going to do? Well, we got to build a assessment plan. Okay? So, and that plan is going to have our assessment procedures. So when we think about assessing controls from an assessment procedure, we have to first determine what are our assessment objectives. So once we know what our assessment objectives are, now we can come up with methods to assess our and as well as assessment objects. And we're going to go down a little bit deeper in that. So what that means is I have to select some type of assessment method, okay? What is my method of assessing these controls? Well, if you look at NIST standard, let's go back to our NIST 853A, okay? 853A is what's going to give us the granularity to show we can do an examination of a control, we can do an interview, or we can do a test. An examination would be, let's look at the policy, let's look at the processes, let's look at the procedures. We'll go through those and see if it works. An interview, many times controls are owned or implemented by someone else, like IT. They're doing a lot of that, or contracts, or someone else in your organization. Now I want to go and interview those individuals on how the control they are implementing that control. A test, this is many times on your technical controls. Okay, these are things that where I'm going to use security technical implementation guides and other things, gaps and operating system configuration guides to actually do a test to be sure that this control is doing what it's doing. So now, and with these are the ones that can be very time consuming, because I need to actually write out a test. Say step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, so that we can actually test controls to be sure they're working. And then the assessment objects mean that we got to have some type of outcome. Either when I ran the test, it either satisfied the objectives or it did not satisfy, other than satisfy. Did it pass? Did it fail? So this is just a simple methodology of how we'll go about setting up an assessment assessment plan. So this is kind of walk through, how we would assess a single control. I just pulled one control out, AU12, audit generation. So this is the actual control verbiage, okay? Like we talked about earlier, within the NIST 853. This is what this control, how it reads. So if you look, there's 3 parts to that control: an A, and a B, and a C. A says what? Provide audit record generation capabilities for auditable events. B allows, and you got an assignment to your organization, somebody in your organization, to be able to select which events are going to be audited. And C, that you're going to generate audit records. This is talking about how to audit control. So you see there's 3 distinct parts. And also, you see there are, within some of these parts, there are multiple things. So now when I'm going to set up a way of assessing this control, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to break it up into these sub areas. So if I look at AU12A, this whole control is AU12. AU12A, and now I'm actually if I want to get to this level of granularity, I can break that out even farther. Because before I can actually assess A, I have to define the information system components. So I have to know at least what am I auditing. So what are the components? So this is the first step. Now, once I identify what the components are, and I can assess that, now I can actually do the second part, which is the information system provides the records. Now it takes these 2 actions to be able to assess A. Likewise, B. It says, the organization defines the personnel roles. So you see, that's that first part of this B control. I have to do that before I can do the rest of it. So you see, assessing controls can become very, very complicated, because even though it sounds simple, when you read these controls, many times there are many parts to that control. Like I say, so I can't assess B until I actually define who the people are. That could be a manager, it could be my ISM, it could be the ISO, whoever. Once I have to assess that first. Do I have that person in place? And then if they do, are they able to select the auditable events? So this one, AU12B, takes 2 lines to be able to assess that. And then I would do the same thing with AU12C. I would look and find what the test objective is. Information system generates audits. Now, once I do these, now I would actually come up with a test plan. How will I test that the information system generates audits? Well, I would log on to that system, probably go into the WIN events folder and look at and see if it's generating the audits that's required for to meet AU2 and with the content that's in control AU3. So basically, I would write now a test for each of these sub components. So, or each of these objectives. I've got objectives, then I'll write a test, and then I'm also going to define what good looks like. Basically, excuse me, what should the output be? Because when I run the test, now I want to see that my actual results match my expected results. So a tool we use sometimes with regard to testing in a test environment. There's multiple tools, because many times we want to see if our controls are capturing vulnerabilities. One of the things that we use quite a bit with vulnerability testing, as we were talking about assessing controls, is a tool called Nessus. The company is Tenable, Tenable, Tenable. But yeah, what Nessus does, it scans our system for vulnerabilities. It's a vulnerability scanning tool, and great tool. And what it has is called plugins. Okay, and what a plugin is, it goes out to Tenable, got to his home company, that have put together a list based on the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS. Excuse me. That is a list of all the known vulnerabilities in operating systems and applications and devices. So it goes and pulls in all of these known vulnerabilities, and then it scans your information system to see if any of these known vulnerabilities exist on your information system. The first thing it does, it has to know what your information system is. So it will scan your entire network if you want it to. You can tell it how you want it to scan. Now, when I did this scan on this particular system, it's a basic scan. I wanted to scan 192.168.86.0/24. What that says is it's going to scan every IP address, all 254 usable IP addresses within that network ID. Okay, so that's what it did. It went and scanned and looked for every IP address within the 192.168.86.0 ID. So that's 254. But all 254 wasn't used. As you see, these are the only ones that had been assigned. 192.168.86.1.20.22. And I could drill down into these and actually tell you what devices these are. That one, more than likely, that's the router. That is the gateway. That's typically you're going to assign the first IP address to the gateway. These others are probably different devices on the network, such as, computers. It could be the printer. It could be, Roku devices, anything that's on that network, it's going to show it. Then what it does, once it enumerates your network, then it actually does the scan. And as you see, you got to have a color code. Now, what it does, it breaks it out down here by color code. And starting from red is critical, orange is high, yellow medium, green is low. Blue is informational, meaning that it's not anything that's really going on, but it just gives you some information that here's just some good information to know about this particular vulnerability. Okay, but it's just informational. And as you see, most of these are blue. Like I said, this network doesn't look too bad. There's a couple reds here and there, oranges and greens, but by and large, everything is informational. So that is the scan of the entire network. Now what you can do, you can drill down. I want to look at my gateway and see, okay, what is this? What are this yellow that I'm seeing? I think 3 yellows right there. Well, now I can actually click on, what I do, I can just click on this blue bar right here, anywhere in here, and it's going to, or better yet, I'm sorry, on that orange, yellow right there. If I click on that yellow, it's going to drill down and show, this is what's going on with this one host on my network. Now I am just looking at one host. Before, I was looking at the gateway, all of the hosts and everything. Now I'm just looking at that one host, the gateway. So now it's telling me, now I see a purple show up. Well, what is purple? Well, what purple is telling you that there are multiple events. This SSL, secure socket layer, there are multiple events here, or mixed events. So if I want to drill even deeper, yeah, I can go down even farther. So now when I click into here, now this is showing me, if you look up here, you see there's actually 5, says the count is 5. So there are 5 events rolled up under that purple. So when I drill into it, now you see I have this one medium. It says what the SSL certificate cannot be trusted. Doesn't mean that something has happened. It's just showing that there's a vulnerability that on this network I've got a SSL certificate that's in my SSL cache, certificate cache, that could not be trusted. And that's what that scan is showing me. The rest of these are informational, those blues. I'm not too concerned about those. Only one that I would probably take a look at is that. Well, what else do I need to know about that? Well, if I click on this again, I can drill down, you got it, even farther, and I am not going to try to read all this text to you, but what this is now, it'll give you a description of the vulnerability of this plugin and what it finds. And if I was able to scroll down farther, it would actually show you the certificate that it cannot be trusted. So that way, if I want to go back and remove that certificate or delete that certificate, now I can clear up this vulnerability. Now, all this information over here on the side, like I say, these are your different risk factors. Like I say, if you go out to the CVSS website, it'll give you a lot more about what's going on, from a CVSS perspective and this particular vulnerability. So that is how Nessus allows us to look at our network holistically, drill into a particular host, and then within that host, look at the vulnerabilities, and they're weighted, whether they are critical, high, medium, on down, low, all the way down to informational. And then I can drill down again to find out exactly what this vulnerability entails. And is it something, even though it's a vulnerability, the likelihood may be very low, So that way I can determine if I need to take any actions to mitigate this risk, okay? So that is how the Nessus works to help us to find vulnerabilities. All right, so what we're going to cover this week, and we really talked about 2 things: how we select security controls once we select them and implement them, and then how we assess controls and look at vulnerabilities within those control families. Again, guys, have a great week. Have a great week. God bless you. And just remember, if you have any comments, questions, please reach out. Take care.